Hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope you're doing awesome. This is an epic day for me because I have one guy that has just been so pivotal in my career and my development, Eric Plantenberg. He's now with Lunch Box. Hey, Eric, how are you?
You're doing really well, Dave. Thanks.
Awesome. So you're in Oregon and I'm in Wisconsin, but I think you're from Wisconsin, aren't you?
I did. I grew up in Wisconsin, between Milwaukee, and I graduated from Green Bay.
Awesome. Oh my gosh. So I'm so excited to hang out with you. I don't even know, I can't even remember the course name, but I know that I spent 2 or 3 days with you and Roger in Madison. And I can tell you, honestly, it was the first time that I ever had done any meditation of any type. So you introduced me to that, and I was such an anti-meditation person prior to hanging out with you. And then you said we're going to do it, and I almost left the room. It was so anti, right? And I'm like, Dave, really, just let it play out, and it did. And I thank you so much for making yourself vulnerable and opening that part of me up. So I got a ton of questions. Tell me a little bit about Lunchbox and what's going on there.
Yeah, so Lunchbox is a cannabis company. We operate both in the regulated THC market here in Oregon, and then we also
Okay.
have CBD products
Okay.
that are available without THC all across the country. So it's it's a consumer packaged goods company that's bringing cannabis, which certainly I believe has its place both
Sure.
medically, recreationally, and in the world.
Awesome. And so all those words, I'm like, oh my gosh, what is all that stuff? So I mean, it just reminds me of high school. So
Yeah.
I want to understand. So like medicinal, I mean, CBD has really been proven to have a ton of value that's been added. Are you on a lot of research being done still in that area, or where do you
Yeah,
fit in that
there's a
situation?
tremendous amount of research that are still coming. I think we hard to quantify, but know a very, very small amount of what the plant is capable of doing medically at this point. I actually love having this conversation because I think that the conversation about cannabis, it's so different
Yeah.
with different parts of the country. Like I
Oh,
can
sure.
imagine that some of your listeners are like very educated about cannabis and they understand how it's used, the benefits, how it's recreationally safe, what to
Sure.
avoid, or the pitfalls. And then some people are like, oh my gosh, they're talking about pot already? Like, what is this?
Exactly. Oh my
Yeah.
God. And I'm the second guy, and not in a bad way, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you kind of, obviously, not obviously, but experimented with it as a kid. And then you
Yeah.
kind of went away, and now it comes back, and it's like, it's got this connotation, right? Where you have to really fight through that to be able to use it in a positive way. So how do you combat that?
Yeah. So for me, I don't try to convince people of anything.
Sure.
I really respect that people have unique and different beliefs. And, for me, I've not seen really valid examples of where prohibition has allowed people personal choice and freedoms that actually make their lives better.
Sure.
The argument that if we prohibit things clearly didn't work with alcohol, it clearly didn't work with cannabis.
Okay.
And the reality is that cannabis is not a gateway to anything, in my opinion.
Sure.
Certainly, people believe that it can lead to use of much harder drugs that are
Right.
hard for people. But cannabis, I think, has a really important place in society. Again, both medically and recreationally. The opioid crisis is clearly off the rails,
Yeah.
and it's really not good for society.
Sure.
Many people effectively use cannabis for everything from pain relief to stress relief to anti-anxiety, sleep benefits. So that's something that I believe has its place. And then, from a recreational standpoint, I grew up in Wisconsin like you did.
Yeah.
And, kids learn how to drink when you're 14, 15, 16 years old in
Exactly.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And I don't think that alcohol should be prohibited, but cannabis certainly in my life now has a really healthy place for
Sure.
socialization. I'm a much better dad when I'm not hungover, and
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, I think it's something that I'm real grateful for its place in my life.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's, I think about just that negative connotation. And so, and part of what we're going to talk about is your incredible research and things that you did on, and specifically the anatomy of results. And that's just changed me personally listening to that and getting involved with that. So tell me a little bit about, and there's a TED talk on that, which, how you combined 6 videos or 6 audios into 15 minutes. You did a fantastic job at it. So, just kind of unpack that a little bit for the listener about what, where that came from for you, and what that premise is, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about this. So, starting in 1996, my best friend at the time, Roger Sipe, and I launched a company, a personal development company in Wisconsin that turned into Freedom Personal Development. And over the course of many years, literally over a decade, we worked with thousands of companies and people on improving their performance personally, professionally, with their health. And out of that came a retreat that I used to lead called the Abundant Living Retreat. And it was really a pretty simple premise. How do you take all of the areas of your life that you care about most, the relationships that are most important to you, your physical health, your career, your areas of contribution, and make them work well at the same time?
Sure. Yeah.
I know I've certainly experienced this, and many people have experienced in their lives, that your life can sometimes be like spinning a plate.
Yep.
And these relationships are going really well, but I'm not in the best shape, or things at work are going exceptionally well, but I don't feel
Right.
super connected to my family.
Yep.
How do you put it all together at the same time? And that was really meaningful to me, because I don't think that our lives live in silos. And I saw a tremendous amount of unhappiness and dis-ease from men and women that were incredibly successful in their
Sure.
careers.
Wow.
And that's nobody wants that. Nobody wants
Yeah.
to, be a rock star at work and then to not love their
Yep.
life. And
Yep.
there's been a statistic, I was exposed to this when I was in college. I first learned about it, that 76% of people are fundamentally unhappy with their career or their professional life.
Jeez.
And
Wow.
that's brutal. So how do
Yeah,
you
it
how do you
is.
change
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
So from that is where this the idea of the anatomy of results came from.
Wow. And so take us through the version of this that is like the highlights of it, because it just changed. Like I said, when the three chunks, the intention and the state and the action, those 3 things, when you kind of unpack that in your TED talk and in these trainings, it was like, I never thought of this stuff before. And so it was just so refreshing to be exposed to that. So I really am hoping you can expose our listeners to this, to give them a kind of a breath of this, so that they can hopefully learn more from you.
Yeah. So anyone listening, you can think about in your own life, there are things and areas that you want to get positive and predictable results in, whether that's running a marathon or losing some weight or getting stronger, healthier in an area, completing a project, getting a job, finishing your university degree, whatever it can be. There's
Sure.
a result that you want to get.
Yep.
So this isn't going to be anything new. This isn't, I didn't invent what I'm about to share. What I did is I just put it together in a way that many people have told me is just very easy to grasp, and it
Yeah.
simplifies how to look at it. So the way that I look at it is there's basically 3 macro components in any result. Number 1 is the intention that you have. Everything is created by humans twice. First, it's created in your mind, and then it's created in reality. When you set out to build a house, the first thing you do is you build a blueprint and you see it in your
Hmm.
mind.
Yep.
Nobody would ever show up at a job site with a bunch of wood and hammers and just
Yep.
start whacking things together. So you kind of see this in your mind first.
Yep.
And that happens even in short periods. It's not like you have to draw a blueprint before you want to go to the grocery store. But even something as simple as going to the grocery store, you see it in your mind. You have the
Sure.
thought, oh, I'm
Sure.
going to go to the grocery store,
Yep.
before you actually do it. And that component of intention is everything from your dreams, your goals, your to-do list. And the clearer that people are about what their intentions are, and the more consistent they are with their intentions, really makes a difference in the results that they get. For
Sure.
example, many people have thought, oh, I want to run a marathon, or I want to climb a mountain, or I want to do whatever they want to do. And if you think that thought once, that's a lightly held intention. It's a very soft intention. Well, if you think that same thought every day for 100 days, you're much
Yeah.
more likely to do something about it.
Sure. Okay.
So intention is the first piece. The second piece is state. And state, what I mean by that, I'm defining it as this is your emotional or energetic experience. And we all have a state throughout every moment of every day. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad, sometimes you're disappointed, sometimes you're jealous, sometimes you're confident.
Mm-hmm.
People have different emotional experiences.
Yeah.
And that, in my experience, definitively moves the needle on what is the outcome. What's the outcome of a conversation? What's the outcome of a presentation, whatever it may be,
Okay.
a collaboration. And then lastly is action. And action is actually what you're doing. It's the training that you have. It's the skill with which you move your hands or move your mind, or it's what are you actually doing?
Okay.
So these three things all work together in ultimately creating the results that we get in our lives.
Wow. And I totally think that those three things, I remember thinking about when you asked that question of the percentages of each.
Yeah.
It was just totally crazy. So what's the research there? Because if you had to, I envision like a pie of 100%, and it's like, how much of each does this actually constitute a result? I'm thinking, like, for me, because I'm an action person, I'm
Yeah.
thinking action is like 80%, and then this intention's 10 and state's 10. I was totally blown away on how wrong I was, and not in a bad way, but just
Yeah.
I needed that, education, and that really helps. So fill us in on how that pie looks from your research.
Yeah. Well, for starters, I don't think that there are, to your point, there's not right or wrong answers.
Yep.
So I love to ask the question of people, what percentage of those three dynamics create the results in your life?
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
here's what I found. What I found is that most people say very similar to what you said, Dave, that action is predominantly it. And
Right.
there's some rationale behind it that, well, if you
Yep.
don't do anything, nothing happens,
Right.
which
Yep.
I totally agree.
Yep.
And your intention, yeah, you definitely want to have a blueprint, but that's maybe not that important. And state is just kind of along for the ride.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. That's what I think, right?
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
what most people think.
Right.
And,
Yep.
and I just really want to make this clear. That's not wrong.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
don't think that that's
Yep.
wrong. I
Right.
just think that it's interesting to note that when you look at incredibly high performers, when you look at people like, I have a really good friend of mine here in Bend. His name is Matthias Giroux. If you go to Google and hit Super Frenchie, he's the best base jump skier in the world.
Okay.
So what he does is he skis off of almost impossible to ski mountains, will fly off cliffs, and then open a parachute and make it down. And
Land
he's
safely.
and safely, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's been doing this. He's in his 30s,
Oh
so
my God.
he's
Yeah.
been doing this for almost 2 decades.
Wow.
And so he's an incredible skier.
Okay.
He's an incredible mountaineer, and he has incredible skills. And the projects that he does require an immense amount of planning. I mean, he'll plan for 6 to 12 months,
Oh
maybe
wow.
longer,
Sure.
to do one ski run
Sure.
and jump
Okay.
off. So obviously, there's a lot of intention there.
Yeah.
But back to my bigger point is that what I kept hearing from elite performers, from people that were absolute best in class, and this is in medicine, it's in business, it's in art, it's in athletics, is that the intention is really important. It's like 20, 30% of this bigger equation.
Sure.
But really, what they believe is the most important is state.
Yeah. That
What's your
blew me
focus
away.
level? What's your confidence? What's
Yep.
your, because and here's what Matthias would say. Matthias would say that there's thousands of people on the planet that are better technical skiers than he is.
Sure.
Thousands. And he would say that there are thousands of people that can climb mountains as well as he can. But what he's the best in the world at is putting those dynamics together and doing it in a way that is safe and fun and well thought out and planned, which is really which is really a state.
Wow. So what are the best performers statewide? What is that number roughly of that pie? I mean, the state was way more than I had ever thought. Like you said, I thought it was just along for the ride, you know.
Yeah. No, I'd
It's
say 60 to 70% is the most common answer that I hear
geez.
from
And that,
people that
yeah,
are just, wildly successful at what they do. And another thing that I think is really important, and this is not just the Olympians or, the best in the world or the,
yeah,
mega successful business people, but if you look at people that have taken major jumps in their career, there's a guy on our sales team named Kevin Ray. He's a really, really strong young salesperson. He's in his 20s, really focused, and he's made a quantum leap in his career in the last 6 to 8 months.
okay,
And I just talked to him recently. I'm like, hey, Kevin, what's the difference? What's the
yeah,
difference between, he goes, it's simple. It's my attitude.
yeah,
He goes, I'm not
wow,
working any harder. He
yeah,
goes, I'm working hard and I'm focused, but I don't have any different really goals. He goes, I've just changed the way that I look at myself and what I'm doing at my customers. And he's getting tremendously different results. His sales are up in some areas over 100%.
wow.
Mhm.
Is he, have you spent time with them on this anatomy of the results piece, or was this just coincidental that it coincided with your company?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way that I talk about things in the TED Talk is clearly what I believe
Yeah.
and, what we talk about, at the different companies that I've been running for the last many years.
Wow, that is so cool. So then the last little chunk of that is the action, which again, I thought was the vast majority of it. And it actually turns out if your intention is right and your state is right, that's kind of along for the ride. I mean, it seemed like it kind of,
Yeah,
flipped a little bit. So what's the
totally agree.
last percentage of that?
Yeah. So again, the percentage in my mind is 10% or less. And
Wow.
again, a lot of people see it differently than that.
Yeah,
They're like,
sure.
no, it's like half. And I'm like, good. I'm
Yeah,
sure you're right.
sure.
I'm
Absolutely.
not here
Yeah.
to argue with
Yeah,
anybody.
for sure.
I just know that again, the people that I've talked about in the TED Talk or that I've seen that are on the Olympic team
Yep.
or they are one of the best research scientists in the world. They give me radically different. I've never had somebody like that come up to me and go, "Yeah, action is 50%."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. I remember you talking about one of the Olympians because you spent some time with, not a swimmer. Was it a skier? I was trying to
No,
remember.
I've worked with a bunch of Olympians over time, but maybe the one from the TED Talk is Kristen Armstrong. She's
Yes, yeah,
the female cyclist, a
cyclist. That's what it was. Yep.
incredible,
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
Wow. And so do you do much of this anymore? Have you kept that going, or are you kind of more focused on your individual businesses?
Yeah, no, I really enjoy personal development,
Yeah.
and I think it has an incredibly wonderful place. For me, it was really important. I did that professionally for 18 years, and it was important for me to step out of the classroom and step out of wearing a microphone and running the retreats
Okay.
to just take for the last 6, 7 years now, 8 years. I've been really focused on running consumer packaged goods companies.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
Hum Kombucha was a project that I worked on for a bunch of years that we had some pretty good success. And now Lunch Box Alchemy is something that I'm really passionate about. And again, for me, I love teaching and I love being at the front of the room, but I
Yeah.
love actually doing it more.
Okay.
Um, I like actually climbing mountains, not just talking about climbing mountains.
Well, and that's a super great segue into that. You're the only one that I have ever met that's climbed Mount Everest. So again, that before, during, after your anatomy results research kind of percolated in your head. How do those two, kind of talk to each other in this?
Yeah, so that I was writing that curriculum from 2005 to 2010, and I climbed
Okay.
Mount Everest in 2011.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah, they really coincided, but that was I love having physical projects. I think it's I believe for me, my life is really complete when I've got, something focusing my mind, my body, my spirit.
Okay.
So I really, try to carve out time for all of those three very intentionally. And Yeah, that was a
Sure.
really, really great project. It, you know, I didn't have this big, overwhelming desire to climb Mount Everest, but I had a pretty big desire to keep climbing.
Yeah.
So, you know, I climbed Mount Rainier early in my career, and that was really cool. And then I climbed to Mount McKinley, and that's the, you know, biggest peak in North America. That was really cool. And then started doing some climbing in the Himalaya and had a lot of fun. And one day I looked over at Mount Everest. I was actually on the top of Choyo, which is the fifth highest mountain in the world, and
Okay.
of 8,000 meters. And I just looked over at it and I was looking right at it and it's kind of staring me in the eye. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. Let's see.
Calling your name, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's so cool. So if I remember, it was like 62 days or so it took you to climb to the top. And
Yeah.
then is that top and bottom, or how does that work?
Yeah. So from arriving at base camp to the top, and then when we left, it was about 60 some days.
Wow.
Hmm.
And every day you're climbing. Is that just an everyday thing? There's no day off. It's just a climb every day.
No, there's actually a lot of days off.
Okay.
So what you'll do is from base camp to the summit, we established 5 different camps.
Okay.
We had an interim camp, we had an advanced base camp, and then 3 climbing camps, which we called Camp 1, Camp 2, and Camp 3.
Okay.
So basically, it's call it a 40-some day experience, 30 to 40 some days where you're stalking the mountain with your food, with tents, with shelter, whatever, because you really need those things in place before you go up there,
Okay.
or it gets really dangerous before
Sure.
your summit bid. So, and then there's the acclimation factor. So
Okay.
base camp is at about 17,000 feet. So you go up to 19, get acclimated, come back down to 17, get more supplies, go up to 21,
Oh my
chill out for a
gosh.
couple days, and come back down.
So you had to re-walk the stuff you walked once before.
Oh yeah, I probably climbed from base camp to camp 2 4 or 5 times.
Oh my gosh. See, I would be so a results oriented, like a high D on the disc. I'm thinking results like point A to point B. If you tell me I got to walk backwards, I'd be like, seriously, we just did that. Why am I doing that again? So, I mean, how do you wrap your brain around this? It just seems like such you call it a project. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so funny because here's a guy that's calling this epic event in their life a project. Like we would say, hey, a project is cutting the grass. So, you know, how did you mentally prepare for this whole thing?
Well, there's a lot of mental preparation for sure. A lot of it is actually just getting the time, like setting
Yeah.
up life in a way that you can, you know, walk away. I think it was 70 some days from when I flew out of my airport till when I came home. So, you know, creating a gap in your businesses and with clients, that's, you know, that was tricky for sure.
Sure.
Um, and then, you know, you spend a lot of time alone, which I'm pretty well suited for that. You
Okay.
know, I enjoy time alone. You know, one of the biggest skills that you need if you're going to climb 8,000-meter peaks is the ability to just sit still in a tent for days and, you know, wait for the weather to pass, or, you know, wait for your body to be
Yeah.
prepared.
I mean, I think about these reality shows of sitting there doing nothing for days and different things like that. And it's like, you know, certain people are built really for that and certain people aren't.
Mhm.
Um, if I'm not built for that, is that something that I can work my way into? Because I feel like I would struggle with that type of, um, I don't want to say free time, but you know, that the type of inactivity time. I mean, and for you with all your activity that you need, how did you kind of transfer from, you know, that always doing something to being able to just sit for a day and not do anything?
Yeah, well, for starters, I would say that most people, the closest they ever want to get to climbing Mount Everest is to popping in a DVD and watching something on a screen.
Yeah, watching someone else do it. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I think it's really cool. There's so many things in life that people love to do that are not for other people. You know, like gardening.
Yeah.
I get how people love gardening,
Yeah.
and just don't. This I just know it's
Yeah.
like a no. I could go ride my mountain bike
Yeah,
or plant some, I mean, and I
yeah,
love, my wife is a great gardener. She
sure,
grows beautiful things. So I totally appreciate it. And
sure.
he appreciates that I like to climb, and it's
Yeah.
perfect.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
I want to get real with this because it just popped into my head. So one of the things that I'm struggling with in my mind
Mhm.
is, so I grew up as a swimmer, and so my whole, life from as little as I could remember into swimming competitively. I always I know to hold my breath underwater. That's just how my brain is, right? So I get married, and we find out that my wife enjoys the scuba snorkeling type situation, right? So I'm like, shoot, I can do this. So we're off of some island somewhere in the Caribbean, and I'm like, I'm in. I mean, I'm a swimmer. How hard can this be, right? Eric, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Okay. I could not get my head underwater and allow myself to take a breath, because I knew everything in me was going to just fill with water, and I was going to sink to the bottom, and my wife was going to be a widow. So, how in the world, what advice would you give me to help me through something like that? Because I can't, I'm literally at a block because I don't know how to move forward with that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think it speaks to an experience that I certainly have. You've just explained it to me, that I think most people can relate to. And the way I describe this might be a little confronting. So this is just how I talk to
Yeah,
myself.
sure.
If you're confronted, then that's okay if you're listening. So basically, what's going on here, Dave, is you're lying to yourself.
Okay.
Okay, so your subconscious is telling you, I cannot breathe
Yeah.
when I put my face in the water.
Yeah.
And that's flat out a lie. You
Okay.
can breathe.
Yeah.
I love scuba diving, and then there's lots of things, by the way, that my mind lies to me on. So this is
Yeah.
not unique
Sure.
to you.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I totally understand.
I think that what happens is that when people hit that resistance point where I can't go any further,
Yeah.
I don't have the discipline to not eat the dessert. I
Yeah.
can't make myself breathe when
Right.
I put my face underwater.
Right.
I don't have the confidence to ask that person out or to submit my resume to my dream job, whatever it
Sure.
is.
Yep. Yep.
What I think fundamentally is happening is really simple. It's that there's a belief that I have, or that possibly that you have, that you've been told
Right.
maybe your entire life,
Yep.
that is, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
It just isn't true.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
And
And
how do you, so what do you do with it? I mean, because I
yeah,
totally agree with you, Eric, because I can tell you that I know that the mask is not going to collapse.
yeah,
I know that water's not going to get into my lungs. I know that in my head,
yeah.
but there's something blocking my heart. I don't know. Again, how do you combat that lie? I mean, do you just run in the water and say, put concrete on my feet and make me do it? I'm just trying to and I'm being real, because I am struggling with that right now, because we just had it happen one of the last times we were on in the Caribbean, and I'm like, if my wife can do it, I mean, come on,
Yeah.
I'm a guy, right?
Right,
I
right,
can
right.
do this, and I couldn't do it, and it was a mess.
So I love Byron Katie's work. I
Okay.
don't know if you're familiar with
Yes,
Katie.
I remember her name from it's yeah.
I love her work. It's so simple. And for me, it just cuts right to it. So there's a couple questions in her work. So in your experience, Dave, I'll just share you what I would do if I were you.
Yeah.
So you're telling yourself, I can't breathe underwater.
Yeah.
Okay. So Katie's first question is it true? Is it true that you can't breathe underwater?
Yeah. And it's not.
No. Okay,
Yep.
good. And it's always a yes or no answer.
Right. Yep.
And then if the answer comes back as yes, that's true, then the second question is, can you absolutely know that it's true, that you can't breathe underwater?
Right. Yep.
The third question is, and I'll just ask this to you, Dave,
Yeah.
how do you react? What happens when you're believing the thought, I can't breathe underwater?
Yeah, well, immediately I tense up, because I think of what it would be like to actually, that's probably one of those fears, right? You see of drowning, and it's just like that's what I think of. I go immediately to the result of what would happen if,
Yeah.
you know?
And to loop this back to intention, state, and action, you had the
Yep.
intention to get in the water and to go under.
Yep.
You did all the actions, you put the mask
Yep.
on,
Yep.
jumped in the water,
And it was the
but now
state.
your state
Wow.
was one of fear. It was one of visualizing you dying.
Yep.
Okay, of course that's going to stop you.
As it should, right?
Good.
So that's the importance of changing that state changing your mindset in that situation.
Yeah. So the fourth question of Katie's work is, who would you be without the thought, I can't breathe underwater?
I would be a scuba diver.
There you go.
That's what I would be. And I think I would really enjoy it too, because
Yeah.
I love the water. So,
And
wow.
I've seen this happen to many people with scuba diving. It's happened to many people. It's definitely happened to people in sales. It happens to people working out. It happens to people all sorts of ways, that
Yeah.
a flip goes on and a switch goes off in your brain.
Yeah.
And you go from really being afraid of something. And I've actually seen this. A good friend of mine, David Shoup, and I, we were scuba diving in the cenotes, these caves in Mexico.
Oh my
And
gosh.
he freaked out on the surface. And it was one of his first times diving. And all we had to do is get him about a foot underwater,
Yeah.
breathing. And
Yeah.
then he was totally good. He was
Yeah.
like, oh, I got this.
Yeah.
So looping back to climbing, this actually happened to me on my Cho-Yu climb, but there was a part, it was actually really early in the climb. We had just gotten to base camp and we were setting out, and it was so intimidating looking straight up at the biggest mountain that I had ever stepped foot on, that
Yeah.
I literally panicked. I
Wow.
was hyperventilating. I was beating myself up in my mind. What kind of an idiot am I? I've trained for 6 months. I can't
Yeah.
even get out of base camp.
Yeah.
And I remember just talking to myself and saying, okay, can you get from here to that rock? And I was like, yeah, I can get from here to that rock. Okay,
Okay.
good. We'll get to that rock. And then you're going to see if you can get to the next series of rocks. And I made a pact to myself that I would climb as high as I could, as safely as I could. And if there was ever a step that I couldn't make,
Yeah.
I'd turn around. Simple.
Wow.
And I ended up getting all the way to the top because there was never one step that I couldn't make. When I stood there and I looked at the totality of trying to summit this 8,000 meter peak,
Yeah.
I thought it was impossible. But when I broke it down to, well, what's the one step that I need to take? Can I find the courage to take one step?
Sure.
Well, then my state mirrored to an action just started making progress, and then confidence built. Yeah.
So did you doubt at all while you were on your way up?
Oh, yeah, tons of times, because I would get away from my next step,
Okay.
and I would look at that vertical wall in front of us, and I'd
Okay.
be like, there's no way I can climb that. And I'm like, okay, well, can I climb to the bottom of it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can do that. So again, the closer I would bring my focus and my attention to the present and keep it away from something that I don't even have to climb right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I freaked out about climbing the third step on Everest in Kathmandu. You know, I was freaking out, like looking at pictures of it, reading other people's journals,
Yeah.
hearing about the 9,000 foot drop. I mean, I was, super scary. But then when I got to the third step, it actually wasn't that scary.
Wow. And see, for us, as a non-climber, if I remember, wasn't there a little hill by your house that was like height? Originally, you were afraid of heights on that one?
Oh, no, I still am. Yeah. Yeah, they named it Eric's Rock. My
There you
kids
go.
laugh at me. They run out to the end and go, whoa! And then I'm like, no, I'm on my hands and knees. And yeah.
So that's what's so unique about so that's where I think I don't know if it's the human brain, if it's the will, intent, it's the combination of everything for us to really, I don't think we really understand our full potential.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I really enjoyed about, spending time with the Anatomy of Results, is it kind of opened up the opportunities, and it allowed me to be able to decide if I wanted to take a risk or if I wanted to, move in a particular direction. At least if there was limiting factors, it was me. It wasn't, the situation that I was in. So I think that was really cool. I'm trying to figure out how, and I almost like, just push me in the water and get it over with. I really, now I want to re-listen to your trainings on the anatomy of results, purely from the perspective of getting in the water and doing this, because I never really made the connection between that state thing until you said that. So thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Have fun with that. I look forward to hearing how it goes.
Yeah, exactly. No, there will be no YouTube video on that though, because that won't look good, I can tell. As we start to come in for landing, I got a question, because at the beginning of your TED Talk, you asked the question of what makes you great at
Mm-hmm.
what you do. So how do you answer that if somebody asks you, Eric, what makes you great at what you do? What's your response?
Yeah, that's a super fair question. For me, if there's one thing that I try to cultivate is a piece of my own greatness, it's how do I see other people? I really believe in the kind of work that I do now, especially that for as cliche as it sounds, it's incredibly team driven.
Okay.
And if the production team and the sales team and the marketing team and the finance team are not all working really well together and performing at their best, then as a company, we're not going to perform as our best.
Sure.
And there's a passage in the book, Boys in the Boat, that I really love. It's this great book about the University of Washington's crew team
Okay.
at the beginning of the 20th century. And they were competing against the Harvards and the Oxfords and the Yales and the Cambridges of the world. And they're this kind of rural, Pacific Northwest logging community crew team.
Sure.
These are not, Ivy League.
Yeah.
And they ended up beating them all. And the way that they beat them is there's a passage in the book that says that the crew has to be incredibly confident. They have to believe in themselves, but at the same time, they have to abandon themselves
Okay.
and just be in sync with their teammates. And you need somebody that's going to charge out, and you need somebody that's going to save some in reserve. You need somebody that's going to be really calculated. You need somebody that's going to be really quiet. You need all the types,
Sure.
all of the traits of humanity. And I believe that every single person has incredible talents and incredible greatness in them. And then I believe that we all have liabilities too. We
Sure.
all have areas where we're insecure. We have areas that we're overcompensating. And I think that seeing the greatness in people and in yourself, and being okay with our humanness, with our
Yeah.
fault, I think that's incredibly important in connecting.
Sure.
So I think that that's one of the things potentially that I can bring to a team or a company that helps.
And that's so cool. So when we do a disc, personality profile, and we go through with a team, for instance, and we'll say there's a page in there that says, your value to the organization, and it kind of lists these things. And then there's another page that says areas for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, Eric, when I go through this with the group, it's so hard for the group if we say, hey, everybody pick, one thing that you add value to this organization. It is so hard for the average person to find something in that list, right? But then conversely, when we're on that areas of improvement, they're like, oh my gosh, these are all me, right? I don't know why our propensity is to look at that limiting, negative, the opportunity for growth side, and not spend time on the greatness part. I don't know if it's an ego thing, but for somebody to say, hey, I'm really good at this, it's just that mentality seems to be negative to people because they have this ego thing. So I love the fact that you can say, this is my greatness, this is what I'm good at, and you're doing it in such a humble way that it's not lording it over people. It's not saying I'm better than you. It just says, hey, I was built to be good at this. And so I appreciate that. And I'm just curious, do you find that a lot of people are easier to point out their negatives than to enjoy their strengths?
Yeah, there's no question. I think that that's part of human nature, and there's probably a lot of reasons why that happens. I think innately, when our security is threatened, when we don't like how things are going, when we
Yeah.
have a problem, it's really easy to blame other people. It's really
Right.
easy to say, well, it's your fault or his fault or her fault, or it's the president's fault, or
Yeah.
it's the politician's fault, or it's the
Yep.
scientist's fault, somebody's fault.
Right.
And, really that's just a reflection of, I think, of what's not right inside of ourselves. And to be able to take total ownership of this is going, my life is going in the direction it is because of me.
Yeah. Right.
And you've got to be able to own the here's where I'm winning, and you have to be able to own here's where I'm losing.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, that's hard to do. That yeah.
I kind of am in the place in my life, Eric, where when people are living in that negative swamp,
Mhm.
I don't, you know what? I'm losing really an interest in hanging out with those types of people.
Mhm.
Number one, it takes me a while to clean that swamp gas off. And it takes me, and it really, I start to kind of buy into what they're saying,
Mhm.
like it is I mean, as a business coach, my gosh, I've heard, it's the customer's fault, it's the team's fault, it's the owner's fault, it's the government's fault, it's the president's fault, it's the economy, it's the weather. I mean, my gosh, to your point, we can create whatever we want to walk away and take zero responsibility for it. And I just am finding more and more people that I don't want to be with. I don't know if you find that, but and all of a sudden it's like, boy, the people that are, buying into greatness and that are interested in getting better, there's just a real joy in that, in that group. And so, I mean, that was the group that we first got connected with years ago. And there was just that, that joy that was there. And it wasn't even we didn't even know why,
Mhm.
but there was just something there. So again, I greatly appreciate that from you. And I got to believe on a day-to-day basis, your current group is pretty, they're pretty up and up and moving up into the greatness that they were created for, correct?
Yeah, well, I'm really blessed. The friends that I have here in Oregon and in different parts of the world are really pretty exceptional people, and I think that that's intentional too.
Yeah.
I was taught, one of my mentors told me early in my career that the quality of your life is the quality of the people that you have in your life,
Yeah.
um, your personal relationships and your professional relationships.
That's awesome.
So, like, for example, our company is being acquired right now.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, it's a super exciting time for the industry and for our company. And many people have asked me, well, why did you choose this company? When there were a bunch of companies that were looking at acquiring us, and the number one answer was the people.
Yeah.
I really liked the strategy. Their strategy is aligned with ours. The market synergies of what we bring and what they bring all align. It's really good. But definitively, it's the people that founded that company and that are running the company that's where I go. That's what attracts me.
So what's going to be the next chapter for you then?
Mm. Yeah, now I'm gonna stick around here for quite some time for the
Okay.
foreseeable future. I don't have any plans to leave post acquisition, but
Awesome.
that'll, that'll be fun, and then on to another project.
Yeah, another project, another hill to climb. So one last thing, this has been awesome. I just am curious, what's one thing that most people don't know about you that you would feel comfortable sharing with the listeners?
Oh well, the thing that I don't know if it's that they don't know. Everybody should know this. That a lot of people, when they get close to me, comment at some point. They're like, "Wow, you get grumpy. Wow, you're insecure. Wow, you suck at stuff."
Oh my gosh, yeah,
Yeah,
isn't that
no,
funny?
I'm like, my grandpa was a farmer in South Dakota, and he said, Eric, people put their pants on one leg at a time. Everybody does.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
a total pain in the ass a
yeah,
lot.
yeah,
And I'm pessimistic, and I say the wrong thing a lot, and I
yeah.
have to make apologies. So, I think it gets really easy when you watch somebody's TED talk, or when you listen to 6 hours of their training,
Yeah.
or you get, emails from the CEO or whatever it is, to think that, oh, that person doesn't have problems, or, they're not screwed up too. And yeah, that's just simply not correct.
Oh my gosh, that is so revealing. I love that because so Positive Polarity is the company name that I have right now. And, so I play, before the pandemic, we were playing racquetball 4 or 5 times a week. There was 4 guys, we had a group, but we were playing pretty much every day. And, I'd be sitting there after, and I'm a very competitive person. So if I lose, it's visible, right? And these guys are like, oh, real positive guy you are, aren't you? This, and it's just to the same thing. And it's like, oh my gosh, you guys, I mean, give me a break here. I'm a human being, and I'm working on getting better, but it's not as bad as it used to be. But boy, if I lose, it's, my wife knows, if I lost that day, she knows, and I still am working through that. So I can totally appreciate that. I don't know why we're held to a different level when we put ourselves out there for whatever reason, or whatever, platform you do that to is awesome. It just is like, my gosh, I still have problems, and so I appreciate that vulnerability. That's so cool.
Yeah. It's keeping it real.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, if somebody wanted to get in contact with you, learn more about Lunchbox, learn more about you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to track down on social channels. LinkedIn, Facebook is probably the easiest way to say hi.
Awesome. Cool. And no plans to move back to Wisconsin, huh?
No. I love growing up in Wisconsin. Don't get me wrong. It's
I
like the
know. We
nicest
have
people.
we have running water and electricity now, Eric. So things are a little bit changed, So
Yeah, I kind of live in the mountains now. Yeah.
I'm so jealous. That is so cool. Well, thank you so much for hanging out. I learned a ton again. And again, I appreciate the impact that you've had on my life. And then I'm able to share that with others. So it's multiplying many times over. And again, I just appreciate all your feedback in my life.
Well, Dave, it's really a pleasure to be on your show. And thanks for inviting me. And I hope that your listeners found some value.
Absolutely. Thanks. And we will talk again soon.